Robbie, in our work with churches, we find that often they don't have a clear what we just call discipleship strategy, and it more often looks like a buffet of lots of different programs and classes. How do you approach helping churches think more clearly about what it really means to make disciples?
Yeah, that's well said. And it's just hard because Sunday's coming. And how do you create environments that are
Yeah.
conducive for growth and then multiply those and scale them with consistency? And so it's the foundation to whether a church is a thriving culture of discipleship, more so than the Sunday experience, because I think God's designed us to
Hmm.
grow through the context of relationships, which
Yeah.
life groups, small groups is just a descriptive term for a smaller, intentional, and consistent gathering for people to connect relationally and grow spiritually. And
Hmm.
we're trying to figure that out in churches. And most church leaders, we do ministry. And if we asked each other, are we confident that we have an effective plan for discipling the adults in our church? We would say, not as
Yeah.
confident. So there's symptoms and then there's the source of what we need to change. And a lot
Mm.
of times, because groups are so tricky, we focus on the source. Like, our groups are lame. We need to go to a conference, read a new book, try a new initiative, get a new study, get better sermon questions, whatever it is. And that's dealing
Hmm.
with the symptoms, but I think it's the source that's off. And because we focus on the symptoms, that's where we keep adding and trying things. And it's easier to add than it
Yeah.
is take away once it becomes somebody's baby, right?
Right.
So at Discipleship Framework, we focus on the source, which is really where change happens in a culture for discipleship. And the source
Hmm.
has to do with our beliefs, how we see God and how we see ourselves, and how that informs or leads to our philosophy, which is our change theory. How do we think people actually grow or mature spiritually? That is
Mm.
and by the way, all of us listening as ministry leaders, none of us think we need to change our beliefs or philosophies. We just want the environment
Yeah.
change because our philosophies inform or lead to our environments. That's our structure,
Mm.
our culture. That's the tips and the tricks, the sources. And that results in outcomes. We don't feel good about the
Yeah.
outcomes. So we say, let's fix the environment. And we focus
Mm.
there. But we ask churches and leaders to have the humility to go, let me process how my philosophy and belief might be subtly but significantly altered to then impact a different environment, which we equip them to do that as well. So that
Yeah.
is hard to do, and it takes a lot of humility. And
Hmm.
the gist of it is in a teaching that we do where we walk alongside leaders, where we ask them, how do people actually grow? And let's unpack some spoken and unspoken rules or philosophies embedded into everything we do. And on one hand,
Yeah.
if I see myself as a sinner, as an identity lens, I see God as a low grade disappointed dad waiting for me to do what?
Mm.
I have that that belief of identity and theology impacts my philosophy of how I grow or mature as a Christian. So
Hmm.
if I see myself as a sinner, then the equation, the philosophy for how I grow looks like no more. Like, I went to church and I said, I get it. I've sinned. I've broken a relationship. What do I do, church? And most churches taught me no more, read the Bible, show up to
Yeah.
church 2.5 times a month, and do better. Knowledge plus behavior
Yeah.
equals growth. Sin less, give more, serve more, do the thing. I did that pretty well as a missionary in Pakistan, high drive, high achiever. I got the
Mm.
gold stars. And it was off because that philosophy for maturity was underpinned with a subtle but significant thing off, because that's not the gospel. The gospel is Jesus says, I'm a saint in my identity. And if I'm a saint who still sins, not a sinner striving to be a saint, then as a saint, I
Hmm.
see God as a loving, adoring Father, nothing more or less I could do to earn any more of his love. Jesus did all that.
Mm.
So Jesus teaches, if discipleship is growing in love of God and others, John 15 says how you grow, philosophy is trust and receive equals growth. Now, if I trust and receive, then I will want to know more and do better. But it's
Yeah.
if this, then that. But if I know more and do better, then I will not trust and receive. That's religion that does not, that's inside out versus outside in. That's the if then. So that philosophy changes our environments, what we're designing best practices wise more than we think. And that's where, just as a deposit to think about for all of us listening, what are we directly or indirectly saying? Do we see ourselves as sinners striving to be saints, or as saints who occasionally sin? That's an idea. That's an example of what gets to the source of philosophy for how people grow in our local churches.
What are the differences between informal discipleship and relational discipleship, and why do you think that relational discipleship is so crucial for church health?
Yeah, I don't think I usually don't say discipleship without relational. And I think we need to unpack what we mean by discipleship, because it's such a nebulous word. I like to define discipleship as the process of growing in love of God and others. John 13, 35, 4 and 35. Jesus says, love God, love others. By this, they'll know that you're my disciples, by the way you love one another. And then John 15, how you mature in love is trust and receive, abide in me. You can do nothing of yourself. And the fruit of the Spirit will be love, joy, peace, these longings of our hearts. So if God's designed us for relationships of love, and discipleship is the process of growing in love of God and others, which means an outcome of a thriving culture of discipleship means people going, I don't know what's happening at that church, but people love differently. Husbands are saying, what happened to my wife as a result of that group? She's more love, joy, peace, patient. She's loving others in a noticeably different way. Wives are saying that about their husbands as a result of the group, life group, cell group, D groups, whatever they join, that's the outcome. And so love is a relational word, and trusting and receiving is a relational dynamic. And we are made in his image to experience relationships of love with a loving God and experience that with others. So I don't think we can mature or grow outside the context of relationships with God, ourselves, and others. So I think it is a foundational element to discipleship. Now, if you go back to the philosophy of know more and do better, I don't necessarily need relationships for that, but I also don't think that's the model of Jesus and what he taught of how we mature into who he made us to be as saints.
What are some of the common discipleship challenges that you see? And we have a lot of churches on this channel that are tuning in, that they're navigating through different experiences in their discipleship strategy. So what are some of those common challenges? And then what are some steps they could consider taking to overcome some of those?
Yeah. There's pretty much everything you do for relational discipleship outside of Sunday morning service has to do with 4 parts: developing leaders, supporting those leaders. So what's the quality and quantity of my 10 volunteer small group leaders? Then how do I support those leaders? The third is, how do I form groups? How do I get people from rows into circles? And the fourth is, how do I equip those groups? Open, close, men's, women's, couples, RightNow Media, sermon-based. We go into scripture, whatever it is. I'm model agnostic. I've seen them all work and not work. What the different, and those are in order for a reason in discipleship framework, because we start with developing leaders. That is the second fundamental question. The first is, do I have an effective plan for discipling the adults in my church? Most all of us listening go, I need help. The second is, do I have the quality and quantity of volunteers to make that happen as the frontline pastors of those environments? A quality leader is about 65% of the equation for whether a group, any type, regardless of the model, strategy, content, 65% of whether that group's lame or awesome, right? And the leader is contingent. The core of a leader is rooted in his or her theology and identity. Do I see God as a loving father? Trust and receive? Am I seeing myself earning? Because I treat others the way I treat myself. So if I have pressure to know more, do better, I'm going to feel pressure to help people get it. But if I see myself as a saint and I trust and receive, then I treat others the way I treat myself. And so as a leader, I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to walk with them. I'm going to be present with them, kind of like the motto of Jesus that he did and said, go and do likewise. And so
Yeah.
Beliefs and philosophies inform the culture and the structure of the environments, but we start with developing leaders for a reason. Because if you do one thing, anybody listening to this, if you do one thing, I would say that changes a culture is invest more time with fewer people in order to have greater kingdom impact. So you listening, leadership development is walking with somebody to help them grow in love of God and others, rooted in their view of God and view of self. So spend months, spend time, build a leader development pipeline to invest deeply in a few to be future leaders, because then that is how culture and multiplication changes. They go do likewise for groups, and you can support them, equip them in different ways, but really love them well and walk with them over time. And all of us can invest more time with fewer people. And that's a leader development pipeline that is what takes to start changing the culture of a church to have a thriving culture of discipleship, which at a minimum takes 3 years. So sorry to depress anybody listening, but if you want a thriving culture, set your clock for about 3 years. It takes that long.
Yeah. Robby, what are some practical steps church leaders can take to kind of create, maybe even assess, and then implement a discipleship strategy for their church?
Yeah, we have all kinds of kind of consulting in a box resources at Pastors Plus on RightNow Media or on discipleshipframework.com. We've got resources. I wrote a book called The Cure for Groups to give leaders, to help them, a resource to help them understand the principles that differentiated great leaders from lame leaders. We have Embark, which is how to launch a group on a solid foundation. It's a small group study that's free on RightNow Media. It's on the TrueFace Life app. And we have the best thing, back to our earlier question of the one thing to shape a culture of discipleship in your church, is called The Journey. It's all I focused on at North Point. It's the one thing I did if I believe these principles. And within a year, I had too many leaders and not enough people to go join their groups. And those leaders had gone through a 9-month discipleship initiative with some of the best leaders in our church. So they were the best trained leaders. So I started being selective with who can lead our groups, because if that's the key. And I had too many leaders. And so all that's free at TrueFace. We exist to serve the local church. It's called The Journey. You can go to truefacejourney.com and get access to it. It's a 9-month, once a month framework that you can white label, call it First Baptist Leader Development, but get a framework to invest deeply in helping leaders really wrestle with their view of God and view of self and experience authentic community while doing it. And then they will ripple out into your groups, live groups, cell groups. And that is how culture change happens. So start with the leaders and then equip those leaders with tools like Embark, studies, all kinds of stuff out there.
I love that. All right. And then lastly, talk to us a little bit about the RightNow Pastors Plus tool and how that might help churches as they're working and developing their discipleship and small group strategies.
Yeah, the leadership at RightNow Media, we collaborated because they have a passion to not just resource churches around discipleship, but to become a partner ally in working with the leadership to have a thriving culture of discipleship. So they just launched Pastors Plus. And so if you're a church that has RightNow Media, you can you can get access to Pastors Plus for $50 a month. And it's got Ed Stetzer and Beth Moore, and it's leadership team resourcing and equipping for your staff, for your elders, for you, to partner with you to help equip you in the leadership that is so unique to church leadership.